Hi, I'm Paul.
And I'm Tiffany.
To some, we could be called career wizards.
And to others, sometimes we seem like therapists. However, we definitely are not.
But for you, we are the co-hosts of the Career Boosters podcast.
So when you're, trying to be a parent and a good father, good husband at home, you're working a 50, 60 hour a week job, volunteering, you add all these things up. It's like, oh, wow, there's lots of time in the day. But I kind of remind myself Prime Minister of Canada, a very busy guy, has the same amount of hours in the day as I do. So it's what you do to choose what you're going to spend in those times.
All right. Hello and welcome to the Career Boosters Podcast, Season 3, Episode 18. And I believe that it's Episode 89 today, which is kind of crazy. This week on the podcast, we get to welcome a very special guest, part-time MBA student Jason Kaban. I hope I said that right. If I didn't, I'm sure I will be corrected. All right. Jason has worked extensively with our part-time career coach, Justin Pritchard. And when we went to Justin and asked him who's a great part-time student to talk to, it was the quickest response I've gotten from Justin about Jason. So yeah, I know that this is a good person to talk to. And when we talked about, or when I talked about with Justin about why we wanted somebody, it's around work and life harmony, managing being a part-time MBA student, but having a job and having all of these responsibilities. The thing I think is really cool is Jason still has taken the opportunity to take and look at the services available to him as an MBA student working with Justin, all while managing a director level role at Suncor, a company that employs 10,000 plus employees, having a family and all of the things that go along with that. While Tiffany and I primarily work with full-time MBA students, we are always aware of what is happening on the MBA students' life. And most MBA students will be working, or most part-time MBA students will be working full-time and trying to navigate all of the things that come at them from a life perspective too. Work and life harmony, and the best of times can be a challenge, and finding time to navigate all of these things, work, life, family, all of that kind of stuff, is very complex. So I can't wait to hear from Jason about how he navigates that. So Jason, the first question that we have for you is, what's the story behind your decision to embark on a part-time MBA?
Well, I know it's cliche to say, hey, I love learning, and like so many folks, but I think I was finding myself in my career after, 15, 20 years, maybe a little hungry to learn outside of the normal circle. And, that's when folks typically, you're reading or watching podcasts, you're reading books, but I think I wanted to see if I could still, compete at that higher level learning that we had done in our undergrad. Is it still possible for someone in my age, which I'll confess, I'm happily in my 40s now. And then maybe, if I'm sharing a little too much here, I apologize, but I have two 17-year-old daughters that I kind of wanted to set an example for, and it's not the easiest being a parent to teenagers to how to influence them when you're getting to this age. So sometimes just kind of being the example is the right answer. So maybe a little selfishly, I was hoping to see, set an example, but maybe see if I could even get them a little proud of their dad every once in a while too. So that's my motivation.
That's pretty cool. And you have this long-term career, 20 plus years. You have this part-time MBA journey. And when people say MBA, it's like, oh boy, that's pretty intimidating. And there's a lot of context that goes around that and what you learn, not only from a theory perspective, but from a practical applicability standpoint as well, right? So that's very cool. And I'm sure, looking forward, I'm sure those 17-year-olds are going to be very proud of you as you maneuver through all of the things that you're doing. I'd like to add this as a second question about the MBA. What's been the favorite part of the MBA so far? I think you said you started in 2023. What's been the favorite part so far of the MBA?
Unequivocally, I'm not to say the classes aren't great, the material's not great and stretches you in different ways, but it's just working with people of very different backgrounds. And that's maybe their experience, maybe which industry they're in. The part-time program affords a lot of folks who are working at the same time, so you're really hearing from their experiences, and the profs as well. They've got some rich backgrounds, and again, it doesn't hurt that sometimes I'm the same vintage as some of the profs, so we get along quite well. But yeah, learning from others has been just the most phenomenal part of the program.
I think we're going to have to put on some sirens or something, Paul, when somebody says something other than people. And it's always a different flavor. Everybody's so genuine. But when we ask this question, and we've done it now this whole season of what's your favorite part of the MBA, it's always a flavor of the people, which I think is really neat. And I also think that we need to maybe use like a wine bottle. Are we allowed to do that as like the logo for this? Because you said vintage and we're all of the same vintage, I will point out on this podcast. And I think that's like a fabulous framing of being a really great vintage. So I think we all need to own that. And thank you for offering that, Jason. And for like myth busting that a typical MBA student has to be a typical vintage, if you will. And it's the diversity that matters. Diversity of age, of culture, of thought, of literally everything. That is what makes it pretty cool. But you've got a giant diversity of all the balls that you've got in the air. So tell us a little bit about, give us a flavor of this. What is it like to be a part-time student? What are you juggling on a daily, weekly basis?
You know, I get asked this every once in a while, and I try to almost temper it because it sounds bigger than it is when you're, trying to be a parent and a good father, good husband at home. You're working a 50, 60-hour a week job, volunteering, you add all these things up. It's like, oh, wow, there's lots of time in the day. But I remind myself Prime Minister of Canada, a very busy guy, has the same amount of hours in the day as I do. So it's what you do to choose what you're going to spend in those times. I wouldn't want to bore you folks with what the details will look like in the minutiae of some, working in operational excellence as an example of, I think it's exciting, but most people wouldn't. It's not the little minutiae, the details that adds up to this really packed day or packed week. It's just choosing what you really want to work on and why. And it's surprising, like when I look backwards at how much you're packing in, it's like, wow, that seems busy, but it doesn't feel busy when you're choosing it, and it's very intentional. That's not something I've always had in my career. I think at other times you're just trying to pack in more and more, and it's just about efficiency, and you're obviously sacrificing other things like sleep to just make it happen. I don't think that's the case anymore because it's very willful and very intentional of what's most important, and the big rocks kind of thing, and it just things line up quite well after that.
I really appreciate the framing of choice. And so when we talk about even reframing things that I have to do this, I've got to I have to get this done today. I have to finish this assignment. I have to do this thing versus I choose to, I get to, I'm privileged to. So I'm curious, if you get to choose when you have the choice, what is it that you're choosing to spend your time on that lights you up?
Maybe before I answer that, you said something there that I just absolutely loved, like the taking the framing, and it sounds like the words, I have to do something versus I choose to do something. Maybe I'll just tell you a little story real quick here. My daughters last year being grade 11 age, they're doing their first diplomas, twins, but different classes kind of thing. And I could talk to one and said, hey, your diploma's coming up. What you thinking? And one was like, man, I'm not ready. If I don't do well, it's gonna be bad. Oh, I'm stressed. I've got to study. And you're like, okay. And you chat with the other one, and yeah, I've got a diploma coming up. I'm not ready, but I'm gonna get ready because when I do well, it's gonna open up options for me. Maybe I can apply to universities early. It's gonna be my first diploma. I'll get that done, and then I'll be really good for my other ones. Like just a small different words, but they're both off studying. That, to the lay person, you see they've got a test and they're studying, but one is running away from something and just trying to survive. So every day they're studying, it's just, they just survived, and it's where the other one's one step closer to something. They study and they're one step closer to what they're trying to achieve. What was interesting is I think the latter one performs a little better as a result, but one at the end of the day is not exhausted and the other one is. And it occurred to me when I took stock of things in my own life, how many things am I choosing and I'm working towards something? I want to do this project. I want to do this assignment because I'm going to get, further along my goal versus the ones I just have to do, and how much I got to do this because I don't want to disappoint someone or something like that. And I found that was a very big difference maker for, we can call it mindset, but you end up with a whole bunch left in the tank at the end of the day versus kind of risking being exhausted. And when you're risking being exhausted, what's the options? It's make more sacrifices. It's maybe start taking things out, choosing things differently. But when you've got stuff in the tank, you feel like you can, conquer the world, so to speak. You can start doing more and more. So yeah, I liked your question, like, what do you choose? But I think it's really important what you pulled out there is the framing of how you're approaching it matters so much.
Yeah. We actually, we go through a class with MBA students talking about having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, right? It's I'm going into statistics, the class statistics, and it's like I'm doomed to fail. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. Or I've prepared the best that I can. I will go in with the best attitude that I can, and we'll just see what happens after that, right? And just take whatever success or failure that could come. And it is eye-opening for the students to see that if I just change the way that I'm talking to myself, I can actually change the way that the outcome potentially happens as well, right? And it's very fascinating that you look at it as like an energy bucket, and I look at it as this helps me grow and develop and things like that, all in the same capacity, which is cool. Part-time MBA programs bring together people at different career stages and different life phases. How has learning alongside people, you talked about being a certain vintage and having, plenty of years of experience. What's it like kind of studying and being in groups with maybe people that are a little bit younger, a little bit older? What's it been like to kind of navigate some of these group projects and environments when you have, the experience that you do?
Well, I'd say I think I was worried about this in a huge way when joining the program. Like really worried about this, and I going to admit any assumptions I had were dead wrong. Like you find folks already mentioned, there's this idea of maybe a typical MBA student, and I don't think that exists. I think there is that huge diversity. So, one of the things I think I'd realized right off the bat is age is not really a great indicator of maturity. Like my daughters are more mature than me, let's just be honest. And so working in some of those group projects with folks, it's not judging that book by the cover, but really what folks can offer. And really quick, I noticed a lot of the great classmates I've had, whether it's just being in class or in a group project or such, have wisdom well beyond their years. Experiences that, have shaped them, and then they're able to share, and it shows up in really interesting ways, sometimes very subtle ways. I think the really cool part of that community in the MBA students, whether they're full-time, part-time, they're all there to bet on themselves, right? They're all there to invest in themselves in one way or another. And when you're around people who are betting on themselves, it's, you're going to get caught up in the current of some pretty like a pretty cool little subculture there. So, if I was getting a little more particular, some of the younger folks I've really enjoyed working with, the ones that seem really focused on building a tool set versus just reaching some destination, that they're maybe trying to build or understand a compass of where they want to head versus a map. That's been really contagious. It's really, really, I think it's wisdom again beyond their years. Many folks have that. They're there to get some info so that they build their bench strength for a future opportunity. Maybe some of the folks with a little more experience are there to reflect on their own, how they've done it and how they could do it better. But they're very much building a tool set versus perhaps just trying to, and if I admit in my undergrad, we're very destination focused. We're very much like, you do this, it'll open this door and then you can go there. We had this idea where we had to be. So I found that very different from my undergrad experience 20 years ago. But yeah, younger folks, older folks, I don't think that's a great indicator of where that wisdom's going to come from.
Diversity is such a valuable teacher. And you've talked about age diversity, there's industry diversity, there's just so much in the MBA program. I'm curious, is there a nugget that you have just been maybe surprised by or really appreciated the learning around that somebody from a diverse perspective from you, whether that's age or industry or whatever it is, that they've offered you that has been really valuable?
I think one of the ones, maybe I've talked a lot about age, but I'll talk maybe about different industries for a moment. Um, I think we all need to, when we're operating on our biases, someone's working in the public sector, someone's working in oil and gas like I am, we automatically put a frame around folks. And I was doing the same. I would say there's way more commonality between those industries than I appreciated. There's very ambitious, very, folks with that growth mindset that Paul mentioned in any industry, whether that could be public or private, type thing. I guess I've been very surprised by how common those experiences across the diverse range of people's backgrounds, but how common our experiences are versus how different. When you think about diversity, like you mentioned there, Tiffany, it's like, oh, someone's got a very different approach to something. I guess what I've been surprised is that approach is more often than not very, very similar. And it allows people, like, that's what's kind of cool about these group projects. You can be working on a nonprofit with someone from the oil and gas sector and someone with a legal background, someone in healthcare, and they can quickly line up to figure it out very, very fast. That's not something I think I appreciated coming into this program at all, right?
Yeah, that's really cool. And when I think about it, you come from the energy industry that is constantly in the flow of trying to do more things, be more productive, all of these things, right? But so are other industries, and you get to come here and see that, the public sector is trying to churn out things. They're trying to look at new policy. You have finance that is looking at, for heaven's sakes, cryptocurrencies and the things that are like influencing them. But we all have change. We all have the ways that we're dealing with change, but it's how we navigate and build relationships through that. And I think at its very core, it's all people, right? And I think that's what's so wonderful about business. And it just no matter the tools that we use, people are at the core of everything, which is so cool. For MBA students who kind of are listening or want to reach out to kind of that director level type of role. You're a director, you've been, at the same organization for many, many years. What kind of advice or what kind of things do you wish you would have understood a little earlier in your career that could maybe help a little bit of a, earlier career maker kind of make a difference for themselves?
I guess I'd share my big aha moment. Came by a bit of an accident, but I think leadership, going into certain roles, let's say taking on more leadership roles, leadership is a complete career change. And that was my aha moment. As an engineer, it was kind of viewed that, hey, my base is engineering and I'll learn leadership as if it's a bolt-on or a new skill. And I'd say that was probably, in my opinion, a bit of a false approach. Instead, I would say if someone's aspiring to be a leader, if you were to suddenly quit your job and become a kindergarten teacher or a police officer, you wouldn't say that, hey, you have your engineering as a foundation and now I'll learn detective skills. Like, you need a new foundation. And I think it's that approach into leadership is engineering is no more. You're not going to fall back on engineering when the times get tough. You're going to fall back on your new basis. You're going to take on the new craft of leadership as your chosen profession. Then suddenly there's this big vacuum, like, oh, how am I going to learn this new base? And I think it's with that growth mindset then, Paul, like, you get very hungry for how am I going to learn the craft of leadership. That was something I accidentally stumbled on. One of my first leadership roles was one of those more classic, you're in this engineering group and now could you lead this engineering group, but also lead the training organization as well, and which I'm not a professional adult learner type thing. And I kind of learned really quickly that it's not about just being the super engineer to a group of engineers or something like that. You actually have to abandon those skills and let the smart people who are way smarter than you. That's the whole idea, right? We're there to unlock the talent of the folks that you're aiming to lead, which means you're no longer that engineer. You can maybe speak their language and have some of the same kind of maybe nerdy twitches kind of thing, but aside from that, you've got to really be, their job is to support them, and that's a servant leadership mindset, but really change your foundation out. And that was I guess I'd say that's my big aha moment, that anyone interested in, leadership as a part of their progressing their career is be prepared to treat it like a complete career change, not just a bolt on that they're learning.
If more leaders could figure that out, there's the adage of what got you here won't get you there. That this isn't a straight shot line. Leadership is a departure from the ladder that you have been climbing, and it's a whole new ladder to climb. If more leaders could figure that out probably quicker or even at all, I actually think leadership would be a safer space, I would offer, actually. So I appreciate the aha. What was the first learning for you on that new leadership ladder when you moved over to it and realized this is a brand new foundation and skill set? What was the very first skill that you had to work on?
I'd actually say the second major leadership role I had was as an ops manager, where we're working with some fantastic folks, but varying different trades, and it's a very busy role. It was actually in an area that I was a reliability engineer in years earlier. And so dealing with our reliability engineer, and recognizing that's now their role, and my job again is to take on that leadership part. The number one skill I had to relearn, and I mean really relearn, was listening. And you can't walk into a room, if you even think you have the answer, you're not doing your job as a leader. The smart people in the room have the answer. So how do you unlock them? How do you get them to talk about what they think? And you can still offer your thoughts and stuff, but how do you do that in a way that both makes it safe for them to do that when they know you used to do their job? How do you do that in a way, and relearning listening? And I mean really learning listening, not just the act of listening and the the acts to do it, but I mean like listening with curiosity. For me, it was always believing they have the answer, whether they know it or not, but they have the answer. How am I going to help bring that to the team, bring that out? Any of the skills I thought I had to do this turned out to be, if I can be a little bit a little tough on myself here, they weren't nearly good enough. You can walk in and ask questions and it sounds like you're advocating. You can walk in and ask questions and it's like, why are you asking the question if you already know the answer? And it started to hurt your authenticity as a leader. So getting into it maybe a little too deep here, but I'd say listening in general was the biggest new skill I had to learn to become a better leader, or at least attempt to become a better leader.
I appreciate that so much. So much. We could dig down that, but we just don't have the time. I'd love a really quick piece of advice for people wondering if they can do it all. They have a career, they've got a family, they're trying to figure out if they can squeeze in the MBA. If you had one piece of advice for somebody listening to figure out if they can add one more big ball in the air, what is it?
I'd say, going back to what we talked about before, like when you're intentionally picking certain things, what do you want? What goal do you really want? I wanted this, so it doesn't feel like fear of missing out for, okay, I can't play late night hockey anymore. Like I don't miss it. I don't even notice it. I just say be really honest and clear about what you want. Not maybe what you think you want, but like, what do you want? Like, we prioritize our day, I like things that are scheduled. So I like going to maybe a little workout class that's scheduled. I like volunteering for hockey as a coach because it's scheduled. So you can line up your day. When it comes to like my family, you can't schedule quality time. You have to be present. And so I know that's most important, and that's what I'll, if other things pop up, so be it. I don't really have that fear of missing out or the trade-offs that are necessary when you're got all these different options buying for your time. You got to know what you want, first and foremost.
Good advice. Okay, we could keep this going. This is like Paul and mine's jam, but we have to move on to a lightning round. Are you ready? Quick.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah, he's like, sure. I don't think I get to say no. 3 quick questions, 3 gut answers. What is it about your career story that has given you the biggest boost?
Stepping out of a comfort zone every chance I get.
Cool. What do you wish you'd learned sooner?
Leadership's not a bolt-on, but a career change.
And service is really important to Paul and I, so we love ending on this question. How is service going to show up for you in the coming week?
I thought a question like this might pop up because you asked this in other ones, and in other podcasts. this is tough. I love service. I just want to think any answer that's really nice and attractive. But honestly, it's having that conversation with an ex-colleague in a like a mentorship capacity for no other reason but because you're interested in this person's and what they're doing, what their challenges are. So just say a mentorship conversation later on tomorrow, actually.
Beautiful. Love that. All right, Paul, you're up. What random question do you got?
I feel like I could ask 100 random questions and they would be interesting, and I would sit here for days and just be like, yes, this is awesome. We get to listen to Jason talk some more. But before we started this podcast, we all expressed a real love for the show Ted Lasso. I would love to hear from you. Who is your favorite character on the show Ted Lasso, and why are they your favorite character?
My daughters and I watch the show, so they're going to be mad when I take the boring answer and say Ted. They'd rather be, I think we all want to be Ted Lasso, but really I'm just hiding my Roy Kent. That's really what I spend all my time doing, is containing my Roy Kent. I wish I had that level of optimism Mr. Lasso has. Like, I know it's a fictional character, but that, like, I love it. He can take a beating from random people on the streets and he's just seems unwavering. He's got his vulnerabilities, he's got his challenges, but that optimism just never goes away. I love it.
You know, you said something before we asked about Ted Lasso, how do you figure out if you want to do the MBA? And you said, you really got to know what you want, truly, like deep down at your core, be honest with yourself. And what you just said about Ted, the word to me that pulls across all of it, and a lot of what you said, is grounded. Like, if you think about Ted and his character, he is very grounded in himself, in his values, in how he treats other people. But grounded is also a word that I would use for you. So I have known you for all of 26 minutes, my clock says, and your brand of being someone who is there to deeply listen, who is grounded in servant leadership, who is grounded in learning and setting an example for other people's, in developing yourself alongside others, is just so apparent in such a short amount of time. And, we could label this podcast that 3 coaches are having a chat, because that's what it sounded like. Yes, you're an MBA student. You're also a seasoned professional. You are a dedicated father. I have to imagine that is also, you are the same as a husband and a volunteer. And that's like you. You are a grounded human being. And those people make some of the very best coaches. So I actually wonder if there's maybe a future calling here for you, although I suspect you do this a lot in your leadership. But thank you for sprinkling that in, for inspiring other people that may want to try an MBA that don't think they can do it. I appreciate your inspiring message that if they are clear about why they want to do it, they can do it, because you are, and here you are. So thank you.
Oh, thank you for those words. That hit me in the hard spot there. That's awesome. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. From our heart to yours. Thank you.
Right on. Thank you.
All right, key takeaways. And I think there's some big flashing neon signs that I think both Paul and I wrote down probably word for word on our pages. And so those, I think, are perhaps easier for people to pick out. So I'm going to pick out something a little bit smaller. And he said, it was just part of a sentence that he said, but he said the assumptions that he made, he was dead wrong. And I wonder what would happen if more of us, myself included, realize that the assumptions we are making are dead wrong, especially when they're well-intentioned assumptions, or if they're assumptions that were previously right that then we carry through but now aren't quite right. Like, if we could just figure out and be okay with the discomfort of realizing that we are dead wrong and need to reevaluate. Oh man, I think some stuff could shift. So that was part of a sentence and I loved it.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I feel like he could be like the perfect podcast guest for Stephen Bartlett on Diary of a CEO. It would be like 3 hours long and it would have so many like cool pieces of information. If that happens, I get some sort of royalty for that, because
Paul said it
like
first.
that is he was fantastic, and I think that Jason deserves like a long podcast where you can really filter out some of the things. The thing I liked also was like a small little moment, and it was about talking about the MBA play and about community, and about people betting on themselves. And I think that is so cool. You're surrounded by a whole bunch of other people that are betting on themselves. And he talked about like work-life harmony, and it's you're making a choice to do the things that you want to. And just so many really cool pieces of information. But that really resonated with me, is like the community and the people that are betting on themselves. And I find MBA students, they're taking a bet, they're taking a risk on themselves, and I think that's super cool.
I love that. And how often are we so willing to bet on others, right? We watch others and we look out there and we figure they can do great things. Oh man, if we put that energy on betting on ourselves, what more could we do? Cool. All right. You're right. There's so much more. I might watch that once or twice more because there were some really lovely nuggets in there. But next week, we will talk about this word that we just keep weaving through because it's part of being human, networking or relationship building, as we like to say. So catch you next week. Thanks for tuning in to the Career Boosters podcast. We hope you had a blast. Yeah, we know that's corny. Catch you next time, and remember to subscribe wherever you enjoy podcasts.